All right, guys. So over, the last 3 weeks or so, in regards to what's been going on around the NFL, obviously, the Indianapolis Colts and their decision to bench Anthony Richardson really got a lot of people going. It got a lot of people amped up talking about, what went into the decision, whether or not they agreed with it, and Anthony Richardson, tapping himself out of the game, and the whole situation with that. The topic on quarterback development in the NFL came up, obviously, and it's just Indianapolis's long-term plan at the quarterback position. Benching the guy they drafted fourth overall, not really giving him that opportunity to go out there, make mistakes, learn from it, and all that sort of good stuff, right? Benching him, deciding to go with Joe Flacco, and trying to go all in and win with this team that they believe is good enough to win right now. Sort of foregoing Anthony Richardson's development. And that all became a thing a couple weeks ago, right, with that decision. And really, for me, I didn't mind it. I didn't mind them benching Anthony Richardson, mainly because I wanted it to be focused on Anthony Richardson and, tapping himself out of the game. I didn't think it was really mainly for the reason that he just wasn't playing good. He wasn't playing great also, but I didn't really think the Colts were aspiring for contention in the playoffs, honestly. So I thought they'd just leave him in there. So if they were going to bench him like they did, obviously, I had no problem with it, just because, tapping yourself out of a game, we've never seen that before. And it felt like Anthony Richardson needed a reminder, or just needed to learn that, this isn't just another thing, right? You're a starting quarterback in the NFL. To kind of teach him that lesson, I had no problem with that. But for me, the worst thing that they could have done was exactly what they announced, yesterday, when head coach Shane Steichen said that Anthony Richardson would be their starting quarterback again and for the remainder of the season, right? They opted to go with Joe Flacco, and it felt like they wanted a veteran presence in there that can bring you results right away. At least that's what it appeared like, right? With the games that Joe Flacco played against the Steelers and, if I'm not mistaken, the Titans and the Jaguars. Even though they lost, it was still pretty encouraging, right? The numbers that he was putting up was pretty impressive. But once he was named the starter, it didn't really turn out like that. It didn't turn out exactly how they wanted it to. Flacco, in the entirety of his starts, in the 6 games that he did start, he went 2-4. He threw for 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. 4 of those interceptions came in the last 2 games against the Bills and the Minnesota Vikings, and he also fumbled twice on top of that. And it didn't go at all how the Colts would have planned this. They lose those 2 games, and now they sit at 4-6, still trying to get themselves in the playoff picture and getting themselves one of those wild card spots before, obviously time runs out. The Broncos hold the number 7 seed as of right now. And, Shane Steichen talked about his decision to go back to Anthony Richardson, and he said, "It's the attention to detail in everything he does. All the little things just have to be at a higher standard." That was discussed with him 2 weeks ago, and he's made strides in those areas. He's a pro's pro. It's my job to get him there. And that is a little misleading. I don't really like using the term like that, but it feels like it fits here, because although when he says something like that, he was asked about, a potential return from Anthony Richardson, at the time that he was benched, and whether or not he saw Anthony Richardson coming back. And at that time, when the switch was made, Shane Steichen responded with, "I can't predict the future, but that would be great." So it didn't feel like, the way he answered that, it didn't feel like he was anticipating or was thinking that Anthony Richardson was coming back. He sort of made the change, and maybe he came back, maybe he didn't. If Joe Flacco went out there and played great, I don't think they would have made this change back. I honestly don't. And that's where the problem lies with me a little bit, right? Because Indianapolis was 4-4, and then they benched Anthony Richardson, and they're still fighting for a playoff spot, but they lost the last 2 games, and they don't want to fall too far behind. And at the time, it seemed like they were benching him, to kind of make that point, or to try and go out there and win right now, right? With Joe Flacco coming in, you know what you're going to get, or you thought you knew what you were going to get, and it didn't work out like that. And my issue with the benching now is that the fact that Joe Flacco didn't play great, and now you're stuck in this spot where you go back to Anthony Richardson, I feel like it's easy to say that, oh, we were just going to go back to him anyway. But I don't believe that really at all, because I feel like if Joe was going to play great and he was throwing like 2 touchdowns over the last 2 games, and maybe they beat the Vikings, they had an opportunity to, just because of how the Vikings didn't play that great in the first half. But overall, if maybe they won one of those games, or heck, would have won both of them, there's no way Anthony Richardson would have came back and played this quickly. And with that, on that topic of developing and the reasons behind the benching, Shane Steichen mentioned that, at the time when the switch was made, one of the things he did say was that he wasn't giving up on Anthony Richardson. He still, expected him to, to go out there and develop. Development isn't just going out there and playing. According to Shane Steichen, he said that he expected him, to be riding the bench a little bit and still learn and develop by watching Joe and develop that way, which is fair. But still, I don't like this scenario in the fact that it's been only 2 weeks, and if you're really focusing on developing him and really focusing in on not just teaching him a lesson, but hoping he just watches Joe and learns something from Joe, and not having this be based on just the results, I don't think 2 weeks was enough to really see those changes like Shane Steichen mentioned, right? If it was all these changes, I feel like that would have taken a little bit longer if you really wanted him to sit down and really not worry about playing, but just how to operate, go through, certain routines and everything, really learning how to be a starting quarterback outside of just the football field. And I don't think that whole process of really learning that and developing that happened in the 2 weeks. I just feel like they lost these 2 games, and now they're thinking, let's go back to Anthony Richardson, right? Where they say it's been about the development and not giving up on him, right? Maybe suggesting that they were going to go back to him anyway, but again, I feel like that's a stretch, because just the fact that Joe really, I was pretty surprised at how poor Joe played, and you had the fans booing, and you had Kenny Moore also after the Bills game saying something like he feels like everyone's not giving 100% effort, not everyone's trying their hardest, and that puts a lot of pressure on the entire organization. Obviously, you have the fans coming in and getting involved with everything and not being satisfied with the production on the field. I'm pretty sure they might have been booing Joe at one point. And I didn't want this to be a panic sort of reaction, just so you've lost 2 games now. Let's go back to Anthony Richardson and see if that changes anything, because I think you're missing the point at that point. But just basing it off of results. And of course, they won't say they're doing it off of results. But again, my biggest issue is that if Joe would have been playing great, the whole topic about development and eventually getting another look at Anthony Richardson, I feel like that would have been pushed back. If Joe just kept winning games, they weren't going to go back to Anthony Richardson. And at that point, it's not about his development. Really, it's just about getting the results, trying to win games with what you have right now in Joe Flacco. But it didn't go according to plan, and now they're going back to Anthony Richardson. And I don't know how much different he is going to be. I mean, he could be making great strides, and I know he's probably regretting that decision to tap out and everything like that, and I'm sure he's apologized to all of his teams and has taken accountability for making that mistake. But I don't know if we're going to see that big of a change. And then at that point, I don't want people seeing Anthony Richardson come back and think that this whole situation, like he's going to come back and be like on a CJ Stroud sort of rookie year kind of level. I don't think that's realistic, and I don't think people should expect that. I think if he comes back and struggles and it still looks the same, that's really the point of developing Anthony Richardson. I don't think the expectations now should be, let's get Joe out of here and bring back Anthony Richardson like he was winning games. He wasn't playing great either, but the bigger point about everything was developing him, getting him that playing time, because he didn't really get it at Florida. He was injured his whole first year. This was really going to be the whole, full season that he was going to get and learn and develop from it. Not really, I didn't think it was realistic to really expect anything out of the Colts. And it got kind of exciting there for a second, but I think really the main idea with Anthony Richardson is just trying to get him better. And once he comes back, because he is going to play now for the remainder of the season, is just worry about him getting better. And I like Shane Steichen. I don't think this is like an indictment against him, but make sure he gets better, make sure he's learning, and make sure he gets to a point where you're feeling comfortable. And then next season, I know that's hard to say, if they make the playoffs with Anthony Richardson and he completely turns it around, that's great. But again, that shouldn't be the expectation. The expectation should be for him to come back, learn, like a lot of people were harping for him to do. And if it happens next year, it happens next year. I don't want them, to have the fans booing him, chanting for him to get off the field again and be benched. That'll create a lot more problems than solutions. So there's been a lot of back and forth. Joe, now Anthony Richardson again. It'll be interesting to see how they play and how the style changes as well. Anthony Richardson is a lot different from what you get from Joe Flacco. So we'll see how they fare in their matchup this week against the New York Jets, which should be interesting. So we're going to get to that actually in the next segment now that I mentioned it, because we're going to go through the game picks. The game picks here in Week 11, we're going to go through the first 6 games on the Sunday slate, and then we're going to go through them, analyze them, pick out some of the biggest narratives, storylines, and factors and all that stuff, and make our predictions on who is going to win here in Week 11 in the NFL. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with the Week 11 game picks.
Looking